Welcome to Crossroad Connection. We're speaking out for those left unheard. My name is Alexa Winnick. I am the managing editor here at Crossroad Bible Institute, and we have a very interesting show on tap for you today, something a little bit out of the ordinary for us here at Crossroad Connection. So I have in the studio with me today none other than Dr. David Schuringa, who's the president of CBI, the usual host of the program here. So we got him.
Turning the tables on me today.
Yes,
huh?
we have you in the hot seat. So how are you liking it so far?
Well, so far so good.
Okay, well, we'll see how it goes the rest of the time. But yeah, it's great to have you here. For maybe some of our viewers who are new to the program, you are the president of Crossroad Bible Institute. You've been the president for 15 years now,
Right.
out of the 30 years that Crossroad has been discipling people in prison. And before that, you were a pastor.
I was, and a seminary professor, so
That's right. So
jack of all trades,
That's
theologically,
right.
I guess.
But more recently, another one of your, I guess, endeavors since starting at Crossroad has been getting involved with issues of criminal justice reform. And that's a little bit what we're going to talk about today, something you participated in recently that was kind of exciting.
Yes, it really was.
Yeah.
This whole area of returning citizens and their right to vote
Right.
has become something that's very dear to my heart.
Yep. Voting rights restoration.
Yep. The Democracy Restoration Act.
Yep. And recently, so you were asked to go to Washington, D.C. to attend a really groundbreaking bipartisan Senate briefing about the Democracy Restoration Act. Is that
Correct.
Okay. So maybe for our viewers, without getting too much into your own maybe personal opinions, because I'm sure we'll hear more of that later, what exactly is the issue at hand with the DRA?
Well, with the DRA specifically, the problem is that the states have a patchwork of policies with regard to who may vote and who may not vote. And in many states, persons with a felony conviction, even if their sentence has been completed, are not allowed to vote ever. And some, the rest pretty much have to jump up through a bunch of hoops or maybe get permission from the governor.
Wow,
And
that far up they have to go.
Right. And then we have some states that do allow people to vote, like in Vermont and Maine and Michigan. Returning citizens are allowed to vote.
So across the board, it's just kind of different everywhere you go.
It is. And so we think voting is a very essential and important part of being a Christian citizen, to have a voice.
The DRA itself, that was introduced by Senator Ben Cardin.
That's right.
Okay.
And it was helped along and championed by the Brennan Center for Justice at the New York University of Law. I'm on their Faith Communities Advisory Council. And
I was going to ask you, how does a pastor get invited to the political game down in Washington?
Well, they wanted someone to represent the faith-based community of the United States, and I feel very honored and blessed they would ask me. There's a lot of people they could have asked.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it was a very quite a loaded panel. Looking at the people that were on it, there were 6 people. You had Deborah Vagans from the ACLU, Desmond Meade from the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, law enforcement officials. So you were representing the faith-based perspective.
Correct.
Which is really exciting because just looking at that panel, you have people from the left and from the right and all over the place. That's really
I think
unique.
we're going to be seeing Senator Cardin's and Senator Rand Paul's speech and so forth. And there's a wide variety there because there's just now people on the left and the right seeing that this is an injustice that needs to be corrected.
Right.
That's why it's nonpartisan, or it's bipartisan. It's not a Democrat or Republican issue.
That's a good intro. We're just going to jump into watching some of these clips. The first one that we wanted to show was from Senator Rand Paul, who is Republican from Kentucky. And we have some of his opening remarks to watch. So we can roll that clip now.
Mr. Paul's bill is known as S-2550, and it is called the Civil Rights Voting Restoration Act of 2014. So, Mr. Paul, I'm going to ask you to join us here at the podium and give us some opening remarks about your bill and about why this issue is so important.
Well, thank you, and thank the panel for coming, and thank everybody in the audience for coming. You know, there has been in recent times a lot of discussion about voting and voting rights. Now, there have been a lot of reasons why people can't vote or have been prevented from voting. Some of these are historic reasons, and some of them are still with us. Some of the things, I think we've come a long way. In the last presidential election, African Americans actually voted at a higher percentage than Caucasians in Mississippi and other places. But this isn't to say that there's still a problem or that there's not a problem. The largest impediment to both voting and to employment in our country is actually the criminal justice system. And when you look at it, people say, oh, well, these must all be really bad people. Well, some of them are people who just made youthful mistakes. If you are looking at voting rights, and I don't mean to downplay, the history of problems of voting rights related to minorities, but at this point in time, I think this is the biggest problem in our country, and the biggest thing preventing people from voting is the criminal aspect or the over-criminalization that's come through the war on drugs. There is a racial point to this in the sense that 3 out of 4 people in prison are black or brown, and I think it's been disproportionate, not on purpose, but it has been an outcome because it's frankly been easier to arrest people who are poor, less lawyers, and who live in cities. And so that is a motivating circumstance to try to fix it, but also not the only one. I think this needs to be fixed for everyone, and it's the biggest problem of voting rights, I think, facing our country at this point, and I'm happy to be part of trying to offer some solutions for it. Thank you very much.
It was kind of exciting to be there with Senator
sure.
Rand Paul coming in. When these senators come in, it's like
a big
this
deal.
is royalty.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I noticed when I was watching it, everyone pauses, and just listens.
Yeah,
so
it is amazing.
Yeah. So that was interesting hearing Senator Rand Paul's perspective. I know he has brought up the Civil Rights Restoration Act of 2014, which is a little bit different than the DRA, which
that Cardin introduced.
Yes,
right.
yes. So what are some of the differences, and what are your thoughts?
My first thoughts are that, first of all, I was very impressed with Senator Rand Paul.
Mm-hmm.
He gets the problem.
Okay.
He understands it. He realizes that it needs to be fixed. And for a prominent Republican, libertarian almost kind of person, that is a wonderful thing to see. It was very refreshing.
Yeah.
The one thing that you may have heard where his differs is that they want to allow returning citizens to be able to vote once their sentence is complete. So far, so good.
Yep.
Except they want to allow some states to still disenfranchise persons who have committed violent crimes.
Okay.
And they do not specify what those violent crimes are. So what that means is you're going to continue to have this ongoing punishment of people who have completed their sentences, and you're going to continue to have this uneven patchwork from state to state on which states call a violent crime
Sure.
and which
yeah.
don't, you know. But I don't want to underestimate or belittle in any way the historic fact that his would be a step forward.
Definitely. Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Maybe not exactly where we'd like to see it go.
But it's a good step in the right direction.
It's a good step
for
in
sure.
the right direction, and for him to jump on board with his notoriety is
a great
extremely
ally.
significant.
Yeah. And so for the DRA, which Senator Ben Cardin, we're going to hear from him in a second, that would restore voting rights to returning citizens automatically, correct?
Right. When their sentences are complete, no matter what they've done,
their rights are restored.
At federal elections, yes.
Federal elections. Okay, great. So let's listen to Senator Ben Cardin and hear some of his perspective.
Mr. Cardin, would you please join us here at the podium and make remarks? Thank you.
Senator Paul and I are known not to agree on every single issue in the Congress of the United States. We've had some differences over the years. But we have joined forces in recognizing that there's an important policy that we can advance in helping people reentry into our society. S-2235 that I sponsored with the co-sponsorship of Senator Reid, Leahy, Durbin, Whitehouse, Booker, Brown, and Sanders says, quite frankly, it's pretty simple. It says in federal elections, and we deal only with the federal elections, that's all the authority we have here in Washington to deal with. In federal elections, if you have completed your sentence in prison and you are released, you have the right to vote. It's very easy to make that determination. We think that is the right way to proceed. I think that's consistent with the values of America. You know, we are very clear about our role internationally in telling countries that they have to do better. But we got to take care of business at home. And we cannot justify our laws today that disenfranchises so many people from participating. So I think it's part of the values of America. But it's also in our self-interest to do this. Recidivism rates will decline if people are fully engaged in their community, and the way to be fully engaged in their community is being able to participate in elections. They have a vested interest. So for all those reasons, I believe this is the right policy. I think it's the right time. And Senator Paul, I thank you for your leadership on this issue, because we share a common goal, and that is to get a bill to the President of the United States for signature. And that means we're going to have to listen to each other, and all of us are going to have to listen to each other and work out a way that we can advance this issue. I'm certainly prepared to do that, and I thank you for your willingness, and I hope as a result of this opportunity today that we'll come closer together with a strategy so that we can correct this terrible injustice that we currently have in our society. Thank you.
Okay, so a terrible injustice. Some strong words from Senator Cardin. Care to comment?
Yes, well, thank you. It was a privilege to be able to be in the same room with him, 10 feet away as he was giving that. And what I like about what I prefer about his solution, albeit that this is what the Brennan Center and we have, and I personally have been trying to get, is that it keeps it simple. Anyone, when they complete their sentence, they may vote.
Across the board.
Across the board. Yeah. And if you have Senator Rand Paul's, you continue to have conditions and loopholes and, to a certain extent. Now, in defense of Rand Paul, his constituency tends to be, tough on crime kind of constituency.
Right. So he might almost want to ease in, such a dramatic legislation.
That's right. I mean, he can't be seen as someone who is soft on crime. And so that's just my personal opinion.
Sure.
That he has to make it palatable. So what he's saying is,
and I think he even mentioned that at one point in his opening remarks. This seems palatable is a good word maybe for a lot of his
that's
supporters.
Right. I mean, he's going to say his supporters, come on, for nonviolent crimes, we're going to keep a person out of the voting booth for the rest of their life. That doesn't make sense.
Right.
So,
but his passion and his aim seems to be right on track with Senator Cardin's.
He gets it. He understands it. He's a smart guy.
Sure. Yeah. Now, Senator Cardin said something interesting about talking about America being this leader on the world scene in terms of humanitarian rights, and he talked about his working with the Helsinki Commission and in the Ukraine. But in some ways, it seems like America is a little bit behind than maybe even some European countries. Maybe that's controversial to say, but in terms of criminal justice reform, maybe this is a larger question than you can answer in a few sentences. But why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's clearly because in the United States, in our culture, we have a retributive vengeance perspective on punishment. And in Europe, they have a restorative, rehabilitative perspective on punishment. And so therefore we find—
For the general public.
The general public, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, our prisons and jails have the policies that the people have wanted. It's not their fault, the jail's fault, or the prison fault. We want retribution. We want vengeance. And so therefore we have found ways to punish them even longer than their sentence. Say, well, no, you're not allowed to vote, And I found out just the other day, I knew that people in prison could not get Pell Grants because they're punishing them, to go to college.
Right.
But even most returning citizens are not allowed to ever get Pell Grants. So we keep punishing them for that too.
Yeah, collateral consequences.
So it requires a total different paradigm, and I think punishment is necessary. But if you do it out of retribution or for restoration, that's a big difference.
Right.
And we could have another whole show on that.
I'm sure
but
we
I
could.
think the biblical way is restoration and rehabilitation. I think because the payback was taken care of at the cross.
and maybe not from such a theological perspective, but that certainly seems to be what Cardin and Paul are both getting at there. And seeing their bipartisan support, I think, is super intriguing and very interesting. I know the Huffington Post, the Daily Beast, lots of people were writing about this briefing because of the interest of that bipartisan support. So we've heard from the senators.
That's why that place was packed out.
Yeah,
because
you can see on the
bipartisan.
clips. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so we've heard from the senators, but I think we're interested to hear some of your opening remarks at the event. So we're going to take a quick break right here, but stay with us. There's more from Dr. Schuringa right after this.
Correcting Bible study lessons is crucial to helping inmates. To partner with CBI in this safe and secure role, please visit us at cbi.fm on the web.
Welcome back to Crossroad Connection. I'm Alexa Winnick, and I'm in the studio today with Dr. Schuringa. We are talking about the bipartisan DRA briefing that he was invited to participate in as an expert panelist. So before we hear some of your own remarks on this panel, maybe for our viewers it'd be helpful to hear, what did this briefing look like and how long was it?
Yeah, actually this was an over 2-hour briefing, so we're compacting this down to the highlights in 30 minutes.
Yep, little clips.
And so I think you're just taking some clips of
Yes.
what I said. You took some clips of what the senators said. After the senators were finished, then the moderator went to the 5-person expert panel, and each one of us was asked to make a presentation. And then after each of us I came third of the 5. And then after each of us made a presentation, then it was opened up to questions in the audience.
Okay,
And so they could sort of picture that.
Right,
And,
right.
and by the way, for those who are interested, on our website, and I think also on YouTube, the entire 2-hour thing is there. So
Yep.
if we whet
If you're
their
really
appetite,
interested, yeah,
and,
it's all there.
we've written on it. But this is the Cliff Notes version, I guess.
Yes,
Or
yep.
Reader's Digest, maybe.
There we go. So, let's jump into that Reader's Digest version maybe and get some highlights from you. We can start with the first clip.
Reverend Dr. Schuringa, you've been a warrior in this fight for a long time, and we are particularly interested in hearing your comments about really the role of the faith community and how it intersects with other advocates who are working to move this issue forward.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be here. I've been a minister for over 30 years, the last 15 years, the president of Crossroad Bible Institute, and I am here to speak from the faith-based community perspective in support of the Democracy Restoration Act. And I think we have some authority to talk about that because we deal every day with tens of thousands of people in prison and returning citizens and their families and their needs. And in our 10-year discipleship program, seeking to prepare them for successful reentry into society, into their communities. And I can just jump quickly to the fact that if they cannot vote, that is a hindrance to their role to be good citizens in their communities. I have the firsthand familiarity with these challenges, and I believe that the right to vote can help transform people by offering and affirming their dignity and their place in our society, and that those benefits will be shared by all of us.
So you were introduced to this esteemed panel as a warrior in the fight. You talked a little bit about how serving as the president of a prison ministry has, impacted your perspectives on the position in this fight. So I wonder if you could expand a little bit more on that.
Well, I think anyone who starts to work with people in prison, you begin to see them in a very different light before. I see that transformation with our thousands of instructors that you may have gotten into it thinking, well, these are bad people, I got to help and so forth, but then you start realizing these are equal image bearers of God, and the best way to help them is to build them up, not put them down.
Right, because we need them.
We need them.
Yeah.
So we feel that we understand what they need to succeed on the inside and on the outside, and so that's what gives us credibility that
Sure.
we're the largest prison ministry with tens of thousands of people in prison that we're working
Over
with every day.
45,000, yep.
So that gives us a lot of credibility.
Okay, that's great. I think we're going to hear a little bit more about that from the other two clips we have. of your talk. So let's roll that second one.
The Bible reminds us that fulfilling this potential is an obligation. We've all been redeemed by grace, but the ransom Christ gave means then that we have an attitude of gratitude, to be servants to others. The Bible is full of examples of individuals who sinned, committed crimes, serious ones. Moses killed a man. Peter forsook Christ. King David had Bathsheba's husband murdered. Jonah did all that he could to abandon God, and St. Paul was a kidnapper. But all of these people went on to serve God and their community. They had a voice there. And so we must rise above our own failings, limitations, and circumstances and be the best persons and citizens we can be. The Democracy Restoration Act not only reserves a right, it sets forth a responsibility. This legislation obligates people returning from prison to become positive contributors to their communities in the most fundamental of ways. With the right to vote, these individuals will have to consider how they want to use that political power. They will have to think about which policies and leaders are best for our country, our states, and our towns. They'll be invested. They will be a part of the community, just like the rest of us.
We see your faith-based perspective really coming out there in that clip.
Right.
I know later on in your opening remarks, we don't have this is part of the clips, but you also talk about Nehemiah, and in the one we just watched, we see you talking about some people in the Bible who are more or less well known for mistakes they made and how their lives were turned around by the grace of God. And another story that really goes along well with that is the story of Nehemiah. So maybe it might be jogging your memory a little bit, but I just thought maybe you could comment a little bit more on the building of the wall and how that connects with this issue.
Well, the walls of Jerusalem had been destroyed, and the people had been in captivity, in prison. And I was sort of looking at the building of the walls, the rebuilding of the walls, which Nehemiah really had to get after him for, because people were saying, what's the use? This is just rubble.
Right.
But in that rubble, he saw a new Jerusalem to be built. And also, I feel it's very important that when it was mentioned about Moses and David and Peter and Paul, what I like to see is for people to understand that the Democracy Restoration Act, allowing people that were in prison to vote, is not just an advantage for them, but it's an advantage for us.
For everyone.
We need them to be part of the conversation. Moses was a murderer. David was a murderer, or accessory to murder at the very least. Peter, as I mentioned, denied the Lord. Paul was a kidnapper. And so these were criminals. But now, think about it, if they never again could have a voice, we wouldn't have the Bible.
Right.
We wouldn't have the
we would have missed them.
beautiful insights.
Sure.
Leonard Cohen has this marvelous song, I think it's called Ring the Bells, and there's this marvelous line in it that's I've been rattling around in my head lately, and that is, everything has cracks in it, that's how the light gets in.
Yep. I've heard that quote. That's a good one.
That's a beautiful one. Everything has cracks in it. We do too, and I talk about that. And they have cracks, but in a special way, God could use the people with cracks by bringing light into the world.
Yeah.
And so, ongoing disenfranchisement, we are missing out. Our society is missing out on very important voices that can shed some light on some of these things.
Right. I think that's a good segue into your last clip that we have from your remarks at the Senate briefing.
We believe in mercy and forgiveness. We believe in those principles I mentioned earlier, that there's a great possibility in all of us, and we're obligated to try to live up to it. Right now, millions of fellow citizens are held back from doing this. Congress can change that by passing the DRA. In closing, I want to say just a couple of things. As a pastor and as one who holds to the Hebrew Scriptures and Christian Scriptures, I believe that all people are made in the image of God. And from a reasonable basis for democracy, that all people are created equal. In Proverbs 31, it says there that we are to be a voice for the voiceless. We are to speak out for those who cannot speak for themselves. That means that we who are in a position to do so need to lift up those who are not, to lift up the least, the last, and the lost, because they have a contribution to make to society that we need. And what better way to be a voice for the voiceless than to give the voiceless a voice, the vote? The last article that Chuck Colson wrote before he died, he was a friend of mine, and I don't think anyone would question his conservative credentials. The last article he wrote was an op-ed for the Washington Post in favor of the DRA. It just so happened that that op-ed occurred the same week that I published an op-ed in favor of the DRA in the Christian Science Monitor. A coincidence? The most memorable line I remember from Mr. Colson's article, and by the way, Mr. Colson was in Florida, disenfranchised, and he had to jump through all the hoops to get special permission from the governor to vote. In this op-ed, the line that keeps ringing in my ears, and I hope will ring in yours, from Chuck Colson, Mr. Conservative, he said, "Let's give these guys a break. Let them vote." Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Schuringa.
Wow, that was a great way to close, I think, talking about Chuck
thank
Colson.
You. Those were pretty spontaneous, those last remarks.
Okay.
Because I think people would be surprised to know that Chuck Colson actually favored the DRA.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that would also help Republicans and libertarians who respect Mr. Colson that, okay, maybe we got to give these guys a break.
So obviously this is a very important issue, and so what can our viewers who are listening today, what can they do to get more informed about this issue or even take some action steps?
Well, they can definitely go to the Brennan Center website, which has extensive information on it.
Yeah.
Our website, we have lots of stories. We read about it. We write about it. We're here. They can be informing people around them in their state when it becomes an issue in their state.
Right,
They
government.
can write their congressmen. They can write their senators. So there's a lot of ways in which people can get engaged.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Schuringa,
Thank
for
you.
joining us today as the person being interviewed, opposed to the host.
Well, you did a great job. Thank you,
Well,
Alexa.
thank you. Yeah. And thank you for joining us this week. And we hope to see you right here next week as well.